Hello everybody, welcome back to yet another video. I have not uploaded in a while. I know I technically uploaded with that ship video about a week ago on the 4th of July. I just want to say that I'm going to be trying to upload more and more often. We're going to be doing a ranking of U.S. presidents. Starting off with George Washington and working our way towards the end. Some of these are not in order, I don't think. But we will do this anyway. So we're gonna start from the beginning. I'm gonna try not to yap too much with each president, because if we keep going, if I keep yapping for every one, it's gonna be an hour long, and I know none of you want to watch that. So without further yapping, let's get into it. George Washington, I'm gonna put him up in the S tier. This is self-explanatory. He was the first president. He very well could have made himself a king if he wanted to. The people loved him. Like, people loved him. He voluntarily did not run for another term after a second term, I believe, because he did not want to let the power get to his head. Washington was a good president. I'm going to add the E tier. I don't know why I was screwing around with this earlier. It deleted itself. We're gonna do that there. Okay, I'm back, guys. I don't know what happened. But so my recording cut. I don't know why it paused itself. I don't know why. But we're back. Um, so I don't know where it ended, but I'm going to, I guess, give you a brief rundown. John Adams is D tier because of the Alien and Sedition Acts. The infringement on the First Amendment, as well as the XYZ affair. And Thomas Jefferson gets an A tier for the Louisiana Purchase, his abolition of, his outlawing of the slave trade, and his tax cuts. Um, we have James Madison. He was the last president to lead the United States in battle during a war. Um, I think that's valiant. That is valiant of him. Now granted, he did kind of cause the War of 1812. I also am gonna knock him because he established the second bank of the United States. Um, I'm gonna put him in the B tier because overall, I think his handling of the War of 1812 was good, even if he did start it. However, you do have the burning of the White House that happened because of this. Um, However, it did strengthen the federal government and it did, overall develop the American identity. I'm gonna put him in the B tier. He was also our shortest president. I believe he was 5'5" or 5'4". So he was pretty short. James Monroe. James Monroe is going to go in the A tier. Monroe, I mean, very simple. James Monroe was known for he did the Missouri Compromise, which I think was honestly, I think that was a good thing. It kind of backfired, but I mean, what were they supposed? I don't think any president. I'm not gonna dock these previous presidents too much until towards the end with slavery, because they really didn't. No, I don't think any president at the time would have been able to stop the Civil War. I think that was inevitable from the beginning. Um, Monroe also did the Adams-Onis Treaty, and he also was a big supporter of federal infrastructure projects, which I like. I'm a big fan of infrastructure. I'm a big fan of industry. So big tick there from Monroe and the Monroe Doctrine, of course, which closed America. Um, which basically closed America off from the world in terms of like global affairs, kept us isolated until probably World War One, which is good. I think that's good. John Quincy Adams. Um, I don't really know where to rank him because John Quincy Adams. I mean, domestically, he didn't have as many achievements as James Monroe. Um, he was the one who formulated the Monroe Doctrine as Secretary of State, but I mean, he did support infrastructure development. I'm gonna put him in the C tier. Because I don't think I don't know. I don't know. He also closed American ports from trade with British colonies, which isn't the greatest. Um, I don't know. He didn't really get a whole lot done, but the stuff he did get done was solid. I'm gonna put him in the if put him in the C tier. If John Quincy Adams had gotten more done, and if he had and if things hadn't gone as poorly for him, I would put he could be a B to A tier president. Andrew Jackson S tier. This is going to piss some people off, and I understand. I totally get it. Andrew Jackson, the Trail of Tears. Defying the Supreme Court. I understand all of that. I get it. I understand why someone may not like Andrew Jackson. However, I think what he did, ultimately, the positives vastly outweigh the negatives. He was the first ever, like, populist president we've ever had. He was a champion for the working man. He expanded voting rights. Um, he also strengthened the presidency quite a bit. He paid off the national debt. He resolved the nullification crisis. Um, he also dismantled the second bank, which I see as a good thing. The spoils system was a little iffy, but to be fair, like every president before him had done that anyway, so he just admitted it. Um, and overall, like he was very strong-willed. This guy was a great leader. He vastly expanded the country. And he left a lasting legacy. The guy he was strong, a strong man. He got rid of the central bank. He increased tariffs. I I will die on the hill that Andrew Jackson is one of our best presidents. I love Andrew Jackson as a president. Obviously, I don't worship him, duh. But I am going. I like that guy. He is arguably my favorite president from this time in the 1800s, besides Abraham Lincoln. Martin Van Buren. Martin Van Buren just I don't know. I don't really know. His presidency, I mean, he had the Panic of 1837. He tried to implement the independent treasury system. He continued he continued the Trail of Tears. Um, he also had numerous border disputes with Canada. I'm going to put him in the D tier, E tier. Um, he I don't know. He tried to be Andrew Jackson, but failed miserably. William Henry Harrison, not rankable. He didn't. He died like 40 days in, so he couldn't. He didn't get anything done. John Tyler. John Tyler. I think John Tyler. Um, I mean, outside of signing tariffs, he didn't really do a whole lot. He I don't know. He increased tensions that ultimately led to the Civil War. I'm gonna put him in the D tier. He is also the only American president um not buried under the American flag. He's buried under the Confederate flag. So, traitor. Zachary Taylor didn't really do anything. Um, he was basically just a worse John Tyler. I don't really even know anything that he did. But he didn't do a whole lot, that's for sure. Millard Fillmore. Oh boy. Millard Fillmore, so far he is the closest we have gotten to he's the closest that we have gotten um to an F tier on this list. He signed the Compromise of 1850, which was a huge huge mistake. Um his foreign policy was all right, but other than his foreign policy, everything was terrible. He didn't, the Compromise of 1850. He essentially kicked the can down the road. I believe I don't know. He was not a good president. The guy is one of our like one of the lower ended presidents of our country. Um, he is also the reason the Whig Party is not a thing anymore. This guy was that bad. I'm not going to put him in the F tier because I truly don't think he was as bad as the people in the F tier. He's close. He's very close. But he's not as bad as some of the other people that are going to go in the F tier. James Polk, S tier. Manifest Destiny, first and foremost. The Mexican American War. Um, a lot of things got done under him. We got Oregon under him. Um, trying to think of what else he did. Reestablished, he reestablished the independent treasury system. Um, the Walker tariff. Yeah, I think he did a good job. He also constructed, helped break ground for the Washington National Monument, and he even created the first postage stamps in the United States. He also willingly did not run for a second term. He restricted himself to one. That's pretty based. He's one of the Democrats I do like. Franklin Pierce, F tier. Franklin Pierce. Um, he did not. I mean, like the Kansas-Nebraska Act. I mean, you know, outside of the Gadsden Purchase, he signed a number of trade treaties with Britain and Japan, which actually screwed over our commercial interests. Um, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, might I add, he supported the Walker dictatorship in Nicaragua. Um, he also was he was pro-slavery. Um, yeah, not a good guy. And this is really when the nation under him really started to become very unstable. You had Bleeding Kansas happen under him. Um, yeah, and then you have James Buchanan. The country fell apart at the seams under James Buchanan, and I don't even know where to begin. You had San Juan Island almost descend into a war out in Washington State under James Buchanan, um, with the British. You also had the southern states attempting to secede. Buchanan didn't do anything to stop the imminent civil war. I don't know if he could have stopped it, but he didn't even try. He didn't try to mitigate it. He essentially everything started falling apart under Buchanan that had been brewing with Van Buren, Taylor, Fillmore. It kind of started with Tyler, and then it really started to heat up with Fillmore and Pierce. And Buchanan is kind of when that's when the powder keg exploded. Lincoln comes in, Abraham Lincoln. We'll get to him in a minute though, but Buchanan, I would argue he is the second worst president in American history. I think there is one president who is worse than him. We'll get to him in a little bit. Um, Terrible president though, absolutely terrible. Abraham Lincoln, S tier. Preserved the Union, put down a rebellion. Yeah, he was a little sketchy regarding the First Amendment, but in his defense, we were dealing with a literal rebellion in our own backyard. He signed the Emancipation Proclamation. Um, and yeah, I mean, that's all you need to know about him. He literally saved the country from being split in two and dying only about 80 to 90 some years into its existence. So I like Lincoln. Lincoln, I mean, his Civil War leadership is all you need to know. Um, yeah, the Democrats now are just as mad at Trump as they are at Lincoln. They haven't been this mad since we took their slaves away. um, what else needs to be said? Andrew Johnson, F tier. Andrew Johnson is worse than James Buchanan. Here's why I think that. Andrew Johnson was a Southern Democrat that Lincoln put on the ticket, and as an attempt to appease, Southern Democrats who were pro-union. Outside of the Alaska Purchase, which was actually known as Seward's Folly at the time, because no one knew it actually had resources. Andrew Johnson botched Reconstruction. He essentially allowed southern states to re-implement slavery under a different name. He basically indentured servitude. He issued pardons to Confederate leaders. He almost got impeached. He was one vote away from being removed from office. He would have been the only president to have been removed from office if that happened. Um, yeah, not good. Not good. A southern racist Democrat in control of the country after a civil war. Not a good idea. Not a good idea. Um, Ulysses S. Grant. I'm gonna put him in the C plus tier, like C. Here's why. Ulysses S. Grant was arguably the best president we've had best president before Eisenhower. Um, in regards to civil rights. He worked to protect the rights of African Americans. Um, he successfully resolved the Alabama claims dispute. I'm gonna bump him up to B tier. The 15th Amendment, he created Yellowstone. Um, the only problem with him is that there was the Panic of 1873. Santo Domingo. You know, you also had corruption, but it wasn't necessarily Grant that was corrupt. It was more or less his cabinet members who were corrupt. Grant was just too trusting of people around him, and that led to his cabinet being very corrupt. I still think in regards to his presidency, um he did a great job furthering the rights of African Americans, and you know, and he also tried to desegregate public accommodations. Very based. I'm a Grant enjoyer. I'm gonna put him in the B tier. We'll put him ahead of Madison. Um, if he had just not been, had he been more skeptical of people, I think he would be higher. Rutherford B. Hayes. Okay, Rutherford B. Hayes. Where do I start with this guy? Um, he also, I don't know. I don't even like E tier. Very corrupt. Very corrupt. He ended Reconstruction. I want to put him in like the D tier. Not a good president. He was also elected illegitimately, too. So the only illegitimate president we've ever had. Not a good president at all. Garfield. Garfield didn't really do a whole lot. Because he died. I think Garfield got assassinated. I think. But you know, he asserted. I think I'm gonna put him in like not rankable because I think Garfield had. Nah, we'll rank him in B, C. Because had Garfield been able to govern longer, I think he would be higher. But the problem is you have Garfield. Garfield didn't really do much because he, you know, got shot. There was also, I mean, still he advocated for civil service reform. He, tried to root out corruption. Um, he, a his Supreme Court appointment, Supreme Court justice. I mean, overall, I think he also championed civil rights. He would have been very good for civil rights had he not been murdered. But I think Garfield would have been a great president, but the problem is, what he did really isn't enough to put him any higher than C. This is a good foundation, but I think, that would be an interesting alternate history timeline to explore. What if Garfield doesn't get shot? How does that affect American history? If you guys want me to go, I don't want to go down the alt history path, but that'd be a cool thing to look into. Chester A. Arthur. People view him as bad for some reason, and I don't know why. He signed the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act. I'm gonna put him in the C tier. He modernized the U.S. Navy. He was an immigration restrictionist. The only thing I don't like about him is he extended the Chinese Exclusion Act. He did renovate the White House. And he was a big supporter of infrastructure projects. However, he tried to lower tariffs, which is kind of why I lower him a little bit. Um, but he was one of the only presidents to have actively participated in humanitarian efforts during the Greely Polar Expedition. So I'm gonna put him in the C tier. I think had he been elected to a second term, I think he would be higher because he had a good start. I just don't think he was able to get a lot done. You saw a lot of technology come out under him. You saw, you know, America become really, more modern than it ever had before. Grover Cleveland, B tier. Grover Cleveland, first term Grover Cleveland was very good. Second term Grover Cleveland was terrible, which is why he gets a very low B tier to high C tier. Cleveland signed the Interstate Commerce Act, which essentially, that essentially regulated the railroad industry. He signed the Presidential Succession Act, which established the line of succession that we have currently. However, oh yeah, he also subdivided Native American tribal lands into their own, individual like autonomous territories, which is pretty cool. Cleveland, however, got Cleveland broke up a labor strike in Cleveland with federal troops. I am going to knock him down for that. Um, I don't know. I mean, Cleveland, you know, however, I think what I like about Cleveland was he didn't favor any specific economic group. He tried to kind of be a president for all. However, his second term, yeah, we don't talk about that. Not very good. Benjamin Harrison. Benjamin Harrison, I think, is another president who he wasn't able to get a lot. He wasn't able to get a lot done. But the things he did get done were very good. You have the McKinley Tariff. You have the Great Revision Act, which established national forests. I like Benjamin Harrison. Um, he was also the first president to be recorded speaking too. So which is cool. He admitted 6 states into the Union: Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, the Dakotas, and Washington. Yeah, he was also a big trust buster. I like him, but what he did was not, I don't think, as good as anybody in A or definitely S tier. But he's a high B for sure. Um, William McKinley, A tier. William McKinley, I mean, where do this guy was great. It was cut short by his assassination, but still, the Spanish-American War, annexation of Hawaii, the annexation of Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, reestablishing the gold standard. William McKinley, had he not been shot, things would have got. I think he would be S tier, but I really like McKinley. His policies led to the recovery of the United States from the Panic of 1893 and led us to a booming economy. Um, yeah, great president. I think he's a high A tier for sure. He reminds me a lot of Ronald Reagan, kind of. He came in at a similar time. He's a lot like he's kind of like an 1800s, early 1900s Ronald Reagan, in my opinion. Teddy Roosevelt, walk softly, carry a big stick, S tier. Bull Moose progressivism. What do I have to say? This guy was the toughest son of a bitch we've ever had as president. For that reason, the guy was great. First off, right, establishing national parks, um, expanding American influence across the world, um, building the Panama Canal, trust busting, the square deal. No, he won a Nobel Peace Prize. The Great White Fleet. This guy is one of our best presidents. This guy, he gave a speech, I believe it was 1912, where he got shot in the chest and still gave his speech for like an hour afterwards and made fun of the guy for shooting him. Come on, like how can you not like Teddy? How can you not like TR, man? Roosevelt, this is the better Roosevelt. Not I like FDR too, but I think Teddy is one of our best presidents. How can you like this guy was a tough son of a bitch. How can you not admire this guy? Um, you know, I really like Teddy. William Howard Taft. William Howard Taft. I think Taft is. It's a shame he did not become president, and it's a shame he didn't. It's a shame it wasn't him instead of Woodrow Wilson. Yeah, it's a shame it was him or it was Woodrow Wilson and not him. Um, he oversaw the admission of New Mexico and Arizona, the 16th Amendment, which is, well, that's not good, actually. He supported the Children's Bureau. I'm going to put him in the B tier. William Howard Taft was also, he signed the Payne-Aldrich Tariff. Um, I like that because I think the tariffs before were a little too high, but I think that balanced it out. Yeah, it was driven by special interest, but he did pave the way for a federal income tax, though. That's why I'm keeping him out of A. So, but he did continue Teddy Roosevelt's antitrust lawsuits. He actually broke I believe he actually broke the record. Um, he broke Roosevelt's record. He had 70 antitrust cases in 4 years compared to Roosevelt's 40. Yeah. Next up here, we're gonna rank Woodrow Wilson F tier. This guy was a narcissistic piece of shit. He established the League of Nations, right? This guy established the League of Nations, and then America didn't join it. His greatest accomplishment, we didn't even get to be a part of. How? How? Come on. Ugh. He showed Birth of a Nation at the White House, which essentially allowed the second wave of the Ku Klux Klan to start. He oversaw, unintentionally lots of lynchings of black people, and Catholics and Italians and Slavs. Um, Woodrow Wilson ruined the economy with his radical expansion of government. He flip-flopped on World War I. His re-election promise was that Wilson kept us out of the war. And then not even 5 months into his second term, we get into World War I. Fuck you, Woodrow. Alright. Warren Harding. Warren Harding goes in the E tier. He was lazy. He didn't get a lot done. He was similar to Calvin Coolidge, but again, he was kind of a dumbass. He also caused the farm crisis. Um, outside of his, outside of his Supreme Court appointments, I really don't think he was that good. Um, he also got us in the Washington Naval Treaty, which essentially neutered our military, neutered our navy. So wasn't very good. I'm gonna put him in the top of the E tier. But he did oversee. He also essentially paved the way for Adolf Hitler because of war reparations. So take it as you will. Calvin Coolidge is going to go in the A tier. I like Calvin Coolidge a lot. The economy boomed under him thanks to his policies. He granted Native Americans citizenship. Um, the only thing I don't like about him is that he denied aid to the South after a hurricane. That's what I don't like about him, but it was his philosophy, so I guess. But you can't argue, like, the economy did great under him. Yeah, it was a little unstable, but Coolidge, a good president, a good guy. Um, his monetary policy was questionable, though. That's it. That's the only thing I don't like about him was his monetary policy, but I think he was good for the nation. And he was truly one of the last presidents who kept the role within its means. Um, but yeah. All right. Next up here we have Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover. I am gonna put Herbert Hoover in the F tier. He was a smart guy, but he did not know what the hell he was doing as president. He really did not know. He really didn't know what to do with the Great Depression. Um, he essentially his actions during the Great Depression is what made it worse. Um, Herbert Hoover is one of the few U.S. presidents to lose re-election as an incumbent. Um, he also, he tried to stimulate the economy with a public works bill, and it didn't really work. He also was a big believer in limited federal intervention, which worked until it didn't. As well as the Revenue Act of 1932. Yeah, not a good guy. Um, yeah, this he is widely credited with not causing the Great Depression, but making it worse. Oh yeah, the Smoot-Hawley tariff too, by the way. The Smoot-Hawley tariff. Which not the greatest thing to do during a depression, but you know, I digress. Next up here we have FDR. I'm gonna put FDR in the A tier. I am not gonna put him in the S tier because I think there are things about him that gatekeep him from being in the S tier. First and foremost, right? Executive order, I think it was 9066. Hang on, FDR executive order, was it 9066? Yeah, it was. The internment of Japanese Americans, as well as the internment of Germans too, and Italians. Not good, not good. He also was too afraid to stand up for. He was too afraid to stand up for African Americans, fearing that he would lose the Southern Democrats. Um, I will say with FDR, still the New Deal was largely positive. There were aspects of it I don't like, but he did establish Social Security. The Works Progress Administration was a good thing, and he was a great wartime leader overall. I rank FDR at the A tier. I think he could have been better if he didn't intern Japanese people. That's what's gatekeeping him from S tier is Japanese internment. Um, especially since there was no evidence that Japanese people were conspiring with the Japanese government to overthrow America. So, but other than that, though, I like FDR. I'm one of the few. I'm a conservative who actually does like FDR. I know that's crazy. I've been moderated. I've moderated a lot on my views. I don't identify as far right anymore. I'm center right. I do support Trump still. Obviously, we'll get to modern presidents later. Harry Truman, D tier. The Marshall Plan failed horribly. Outside of the Berlin airlift, he governed during a time of economic strife, a post-war recession, high inflation. Not a good president. Harry Truman gets a D. His actions during World War II were all right though. So, for that reason, I put him D minus. I give him a D minus. Next up, Eisenhower. Dwight Eisenhower S tier. Interstate highway system. He was really one of the first president. He paved the way for the Civil Rights Act. Um, the Little Rock Nine, I believe, where he deployed troops to Arkansas to escort black children to school. He ordered the desegregation of public schools in America. He established Medicare. I think was it him who he established? Wait, no, I think that was LBJ. Hang on, actually, I think that was LBJ that did that. Let's see, what were his accomplishments? Or I'm trying to think. Um, I mean, he did expand Social Security. He also admitted Alaska and Hawaii into the state, into the Union. He warned against the military-industrial complex. He ended the Korean War, and he prioritized balanced budgets. And he oversaw the economic bliss of the 1950s. Eisenhower, great president. I like Ike. He also deported a bunch of illegal immigrants, so based. JFK overrated, D tier, C tier. He governed the Bay of Pigs. He also inadvertently caused the Cuban Missile Crisis. What can I say? He put missiles in Turkey, and then the Soviet Union put missiles in Cuba, and then Kennedy was like, "Holy shit!" Um, you know, he also got shot. That's not why he's in C tier, but he's not as good as people remember him because I think Kennedy is remembered fondly because of the fact that he was killed. That's it. And also because he was glamorous. Um, a lot of what he inherited, where things were so good, was because of Eisenhower. The country was in such a good state when he took over because of Eisenhower and what he did during the 50s. That's why. That is why the country was so good when he took over. And he was truly the last president of stability because after that, everything went to shit. For a period, basically until Ronald Reagan, everything was terrible. So we start with LBJ, E tier. Uh, he got us into the Vietnam War under a false flag operation, right? Um, he said, "I'll have those N." He only signed the Civil Rights Act because he said, "I'll have those N-words voting Democrat for 200 years." He was a terrible person. Um, very weird. He his war on poverty is the reason that Black Americans and many minorities today struggle because this guy got them hooked on welfare, got the fathers out of the homes, signed a lot of no-fault divorce stuff. Yeah, terrible president. This guy essentially paved the way for the shithole time period that was the 1970s. Thanks a lot, Lyndon, asshole. What's keeping him out of F tier is he didn't literally destroy the country like these guys did. He didn't literally oversee a huge national crisis, but he got close. He's a lot like Millard Fillmore. He's kind of in the Millard Fillmore category. Richard Nixon, D tier. Established the EPA. Thanks a lot, Richard. Now I have DEF restrictions on my truck, even though I don't even own a diesel. But thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Richard. Um, I don't know why conservatives love this guy so much. He literally opened up the world to China, and he essentially is the reason China is now a superpower. He was a globalist. Yeah, he got us out of Vietnam, but Richard Nixon, not a fan. Not a fan of Nixon. He was better than his opponents, but I mean, anything would have been better than those guys. Gerald Ford, D tier, E tier actually. Governed through a period of economic strife and also, you know, pardoned Nixon, which he shouldn't have. So E tier. Jimmy Carter, F. Let's see. Jimmy Carter, I believe, oversaw. Hang on. Jimmy Carter oversaw so many things as president. He oversaw the development. He continued helping China develop into a superpower. He established the Department of Education, which completely ruined the American education system. Um, he tried to implement price controls on energy, which inadvertently caused the oil crisis. Um, he faced a huge economic recession, and he faced a lot of foreign policy crises. The only thing that he did that was somewhat all right is the Camp David Accord, the Camp David Accords. That's it. Jimmy Carter was a great person. Rest in peace. He was a great guy. A great person. President Jimmy Carter, though, not so good. Not so good. Um, he governed again. He governed during a period of instability, and literally America was really, that was the closest we had been since the Great Depression to falling apart as a country. Pride in our country was low. You had a lot of degeneracy. You had a lot of economic woes. Things were not so good in America. But his successor was a million times better than he was. Ronald Reagan, A tier bordering on S tier. I'm going to keep him out of S tier because I don't think he was as good as a guy like Andrew Jackson or Abraham Lincoln, or Teddy Roosevelt, but I think he was damn close. Ronald Reagan just put this into perspective. Ronald Reagan came in 1981 with the one of the worst positions you could be in as U.S. president, arguably since FDR. Right? He came in at a time when we had heightened tensions with the Soviet Union, a terrible economy, high inflation, gas prices were through the roof. Our military was at a weak point. We were, nationally embarrassed by the Vietnam War. Being an American was seen as bad. Like America, American identity and patriotism was dead under Carter and under LBJ and under Nixon. This is why Ronald Reagan was very important. Conservatives will shit, a lot of conservatives, like populist conservatives, will shit on Reagan because of the amnesty and because of his support for free trade, which, by the way, Ronald Reagan actually imposed steel and auto tariffs on Japan. Just so you know, Reagan Reagan had tariffs. So no, Reagan was not all pro free trade. Also, Reagan's union busting was completely warranted. Federal labor unions are prohibited by law. Ronald Reagan was doing his job. You can't hold the U.S. economy hostage because you're mad. Because you're mad. You can't do that. Ronald Reagan was perfectly reasonable in firing those air traffic controllers. But bite me. Seriously, fight me about it. I will defend him until the day I die about that. And I am pro union. I am in a union if you guys don't know. For my job, I am in a labor union. I'm in United Food and Commercial Workers. I'm in a union. I am pro private sector union. I am anti public sector unions. Ronald Reagan gets an A tier though for many reasons. His energy policy led to a period of cheap gas prices in America. He had the farm crisis, which he resolved through agricultural subsidies and payments to the farmers. He gave after the Challenger space shuttle exploded. Ronald Reagan gave one hell of a speech as president and comforted the children of America who watched the Challenger space shuttle explode. He comforted the kids of America and reassured them that everything would be okay. This guy was also pretty funny. He cut taxes to a much more reasonable rate than they were before. His policy of containment, he escalated containment, which was a good thing. Ronald Reagan was also, in my opinion, he is the reason the Soviet Union fell. He is the reason the Soviet Union is no more. He essentially bullied Mikhail Gorbachev. His invasion, I think it was Nicaragua? I don't remember. Was a success. Ronald Reagan, outside of his handling of the issue of crime, was great. He also escalated the war on drugs, which was mightily successful. The only thing, and I will say, regarding AIDS, no president would have done any better than he did with AIDS. And also, AIDS, how is he supposed to stop gay men from having hundreds of sexual partners? How is that Ronald Reagan's responsibility? Come on. I like Reagan. I make absolutely no, I don't keep that hidden. I used to not like him, but I like Reagan a lot more than I used to. Because I've been doing I had to do a research project about him, in history class this year. We had to pick a famous world leader from the 1980s. And we had to, or famous world leader from the 20th century and research him for world history. I chose Ronald Reagan. Um, and ultimately, I think that has made my opinion of him a lot better. And people say Ronald Reagan would have hated Trump. No, no. Ronald Reagan's current son is cucked. His biological son is cucked. His adopted son, listen to what his adopted son will say. Reagan probably would be a Trump guy today, I think. If he saw how things were today, I think he would be. Rest in peace. George H.W. Bush, C tier. Um, Read my lips, no new taxes, and then he implemented new taxes. Operation Desert Storm, though, the first Gulf War was a success. Um, he kind of governed during the early '90s recession. Not the greatest guy we had. He was kind of a globalist. he kind of was like the first globalist president we've ever had, like modern globalist. But he was all right. I don't think he was terrible. He's very like this guy is the definition of like mediocre. This guy is the like this guy is the equivalent of getting like a C on a math test. Not great, not terrible. Bill Clinton, he's gonna go in there too, the C tier. Bill Clinton, every like people remember him fondly because the 1990s were a good time for America. Outside of the fact that the 90s had to have this rosy nostalgia around them, Bill Clinton was very mediocre. You had a lot of economic prosperity under him, but that was mostly because of Reagan, I would argue. Reagan is arguably the reason the 90s were so good. I will also argue with Bill Clinton, NAFTA was a big mistake, big fat mistake. The T or not the TPP. What what was I? Oh, no, NAFTA, big mistake, as I said. He did a lot of things he did made no sense. He had the affair with Monica Lewinsky. He was probably an Epstein client. Not a good guy. I don't like Bill Clinton. I don't think he was a terrible president because he did have the 94 crime bill, which was ultimately a good thing regardless of it did lower crime rate. He also was he was he was anti-abortion for modern standards. And you did see the number of abortions decrease in the 90s under Bill Clinton. He was all right. I think he was an all right president. He's not great, he's not terrible, he is mid. He's a lot like he is the Democrat version of George H.W. Bush. Mid. George W. Bush, garbage. He's going to go in the D tier, the D like a D minus, E plus. George Bush, I don't think George Bush was a bad guy. I think he was severely misled, and I think ultimately his special interests got to him. George W. Bush was a good governor of Texas, not a good president. George Bush led us into the Iraq War, which was based on. I don't think it was based on a lie. They did have weapons of mass destruction, but Saddam moved those weapons into neighboring he moved them into Syria, not Pakistan, Syria. So by the time we got there, we found plants that were manufacturing them, but there was nothing in there. He also oversaw the housing crisis and the great financial crisis, and ultimately the Great Recession. He oversaw a huge increase in domestic gas prices towards the end of his term because of the energy crisis. Um, he essentially destabilized. He is one of the presidents who helped destabilize the Middle East. Not a good guy. I don't like George W. Bush. Neocon. I can't believe there are people who support this guy. I do not like Bush. I make I don't try to hide that. First term Bush was good. Second term Bush, oh lord. You also had in his second term, you had him completely just completely messing up his Hurricane Katrina response, and also the troop surge. Terrible. He doesn't go in E or F tier because he didn't literally destabilize the country, but he's close. I don't like him at all, but he's not as bad as the guys in E or F tier. So what do you know? What do I know? Barack Obama, E tier. Barack Obama essentially ushered in this era of identity politics that we have now. Barack Obama did not do a whole lot to stop the Great Recession and to recover. GDP growth and unemployment did not recover fully from the Great Recession until 2014. Unemployment didn't dip below 8%, I think, until 2015. Obama saw sluggish stock market growth. He saw the oversight of increased drone warfare. There was the war in Iraq, not the Iraq war, but the war in Iraq that he started. Um, Obama also, literally, like, Obama was not good. I'm gonna gatekeep him out of F tier though, because he did have a lot of deportations. He was a lot more of a border hawk than other Democrats were. So was Bill Clinton, by the way. Um, which is why he stays out of F tier. Obama also, I don't think Obama was the worst president in 2008. I think if Obama had governed the way he campaigned in 2008, he would be higher, but he created an era of identity politics and division and, polarization, and as a result, he gave us what we have now. Donald Trump. I like Trump. He's not the perfect president, obviously. I'm gonna put him in the B tier. You have now the economy is actually starting to do all right. I'm not gonna say it's good because it's still things are still a bit expensive, but I don't think things are as bad as people proclaim them to be. Neither do I think things were as bad under Biden as people say. They weren't good under Biden, but with Trump, a secure border, um, you have less corruption in the federal government. Obviously, not. There's still a lot. You had a good economy in his first term. Let's see if he can bring that back again. Right now, we're seeing a lot of parallels to 2017 in terms of the economy, where it's starting to recover. Um, Trump, outside of his handling of COVID, I approve of Trump, and even then, COVID, I think he did exactly what he had to do. Um, I think Trump overall, I think Trump has been a good president and will continue to be. There are things about him I don't like his cabinet in his first term and his second term. Um, I am not a fan of the way how he allowed those South African refugees into this country, even though he's anti-immigrant. I don't like that. I think you got to be consistent. I am against all refugees and all immigration. We need to restrict all of it. I don't know why we have exceptions for white people. I don't get that. But still, he's not a Nazi. I mean, people called Ronald Reagan a Nazi, but I mean, come on now. But Trump is not a Nazi. Um, I like that he's not giving aid to Ukraine or Israel. He killed multiple terrorists in his first term, and he crippled Iran's nuclear program. I like Trump. I think history will remember him better than we do now. A lot like Andrew Jackson. He reminds me a lot of Andrew Jackson, where I think his legacy will get better over time. Finally, we have Joe Biden. Bottom of the E tier, top of the F tier. Top of the F tier. I think he was arguably worse than Jimmy Carter, but better than Herbert Hoover. Joe Biden is essentially the modern day Woodrow Wilson. Joe Biden um, ruined the economy with his inflationary stimulus spending, which surged inflation to double digits. Yes, Trump is partially to blame for that too, but Biden continued it and printed a lot more money. Biden also had the most wide open border we have ever had in American history. We had 8 million illegal immigrants on average per year crossing the border. We had fentanyl. We had rapists and murderers and cartel gangbangers coming into this country under Joe Biden. You had double-digit inflation and gas prices that neared prices that mirrored the 1970s oil crisis. Um, you had a recession under Joe Biden that he then changed the definition of a recession for the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve so that they wouldn't say it was one. The Republic nearly fell apart under this guy with his divisive rhetoric, calling MAGA garbage, calling Trump supporters evil, saying that we are a threat to the national democracy. I Joe Biden is not as bad as other people in the F tier, but he is close. This guy used the government to go after his political opponents. Um, he, you know, he gave out aid to Ukraine. He promoted woke identity politics. There was a big cultural shift under him towards DEI and just all kinds of woke stuff. Um, Biden will be remembered as one of our worst presidents. The voters certainly seem to think so. Biden has worse approvals than Trump. Trump has way higher approvals than Biden right now. Biden did not do a good job at all. This guy is essentially the 2020s Jimmy Carter. This guy came in, he promised that he would be a return to decency, and then you had naked transgender people dancing on the White House lawn. That is not decency, that's degeneracy. Fuck you, Joe. Alright, this is my presidential tier list. I hope you guys enjoyed if you made it this far. Um, this is my list. Let me know what you guys think down below in the description. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, like, turn on notifications. I'm gonna be uploading a lot more consistently. And by the way, if you guys would like to see me branch out and do video game content, let me know. Because I would love to do, like I am planning on maybe doing a farming simulator series, a retro game on Farm Sim 2013. If you guys would like to see that, let me know. I plan to diversify my content away from politics because politics mentally drains me, and I want to focus on happy things. I've been very happy. This has been one of the best years of my life so far, 2025. Um, I'm entering my senior year of high school, so I'm trying to enjoy the final years of my teenage years while I can. Especially after the first 2 years of high school for me were brutal, but then I switched schools and things got a lot better. Let me know what you guys would like to see. Would you guys like to see me play Farming Simulator on this channel? Maybe I could do a second channel and play Farming Simulator. I could repurpose my baseball channel to Farming Simulator. If you get, or or a video game channel, let me know. Hit me up on that offer. But for now, this is my ranking. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you whenever. Have a good rest of your day. God bless.